There's usually a beginning where I like to come up with ideas quickly and not overthink them, right? And try to come up with a lot of ideas, and then it's more like a process of like choosing. It's more less. I'm trying to avoid that what you just described, that blank page feeling of what do I do? It's really paralyzing.
Hi, welcome, Robert.
Thank you.
So here's the first question. Before we're ready to commit ourselves into those big ideas, and we need to find a place to ground ourselves, where do you personally go into those places to hunt for ideas and inspirations?
Two of the big places that I think I find inspiration are my personal life, the people around me, my family. Certainly my kids have been a huge inspiration, just seeing the world through their eyes and kind of relearning things through their experience. That's been really big. Memory is really important, just reflection on my own experiences. And I would say nature has been really significant. I love being in nature in a lot of different ways. But yeah, those three areas, the people around me, my past, my own personal memories, and nature have been just constant, huge sources of inspiration for what I do.
There's one album, Soulhouse.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite albums. And when I listened to Bay Window, it was 8:30 at night on Wednesday, and everyone was back in home, stores closing. The night was kind of starting to approach, but I felt it was 6 o'clock in the morning to me. I felt I was opening the window. My heart was ready for a new day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I guess that's the power of music.
Yeah, absolutely can transport you to a feeling or a place. And for that piece, Soulhouse, I was reflecting on the house I grew up in. And the concept really was through a series of vignettes, which each vignette is a movement to sort of evoke memories, experiences from my childhood, but specifically through the lens of the house that I grew up in. And I just love the idea of the way that when we live in a place, I love the idea that somehow our experience imprints on the things around us in some way. If you walk through a house every day for years and years and years, somehow a trace of your life, your experience, somehow it sort of seeps into the wood or the house itself. And I kind of was imagining that idea and writing that piece. And so each movement is just meant to evoke a kind of a scene from my childhood. So while I was reflecting on my personal story through that music, I wanted it to still be general enough that anybody could relate. So the movement titles like Bay Window, Driveway, Backyard, these are sort of generic places. You might have that in any house, right?
Yeah.
Of course, what I'm imagining are my bay window, my driveway, but if someone listens to it, maybe it'll trigger them to think about their driveway, their backyard. And I just like this idea of this sort of non-specific places, but my own story that I'm thinking about is specific. And that's one of the beautiful things about music is fundamentally it's abstract.
Yeah.
So even though when I'm writing, I'm thinking about my own experiences, there are no words, it's just sound, and someone can listen to that and they can bring their own experiences to it and access maybe their memories or something specific to them that has nothing to do with what I was thinking about.
This is a great advice. So when we compose, even though we're putting ourselves inside and looking back, we have to give space to the outer world.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes a shared memory, and then there's a golden connections as a composer and the audiences.
Absolutely.
And I noticed that you recreating this music at your home, right? You actually perform your concert there.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Yeah, so it was a really cool coincidence because I thought about this concept and started working on the piece. And then during the process of writing the piece, my parents actually decided they sold the home, the childhood home. They put it on the market, they sold it, they were moving on to another place and whatnot. But so this all coincided, but the timing was such that we had completed the piece. I wrote it for a wonderful group, Hub New Music, and they had been performing the piece, but we were able to give a house concert in the house, in the Soulhouse, so to speak, before my parents moved out. And that was very special to be able to do that. And I remember the group, the Hub New Music, when they first came to the house, they're just like, is this the stairway? Is this where backyard happened? It was really funny. They were just like, I didn't imagine it looked like this. And the thing that everyone asked me, the members of Hub New Music, because the last movement of Soulhouse is called Secret Place. And they were like, where's the secret place? And I was like, I can't tell you, it's a secret. So I love that. But another kind of cool coincidence maybe was that later on in the process when we decided to make a video for the piece, Hub had collaborated with another Boston-based group called Urbanity Dance. And they had choreographed a dance to the piece, and we actually wanted to make a video of that dance. And by that point, I had actually moved to this house. In fact, the timing was perfect because we hadn't quite moved in, so there wasn't a lot of stuff in here. So we were able to like kind of empty it out, and we recorded the video of the dancers dancing in this house. And I sort of loved that, even though this wasn't my childhood home, you know, having young kids and moving to a new place and starting a new phase of life, I liked the poetic sense that this maybe would become the Soulhouse for my kids. Maybe what memories would this house bring to me and my family? I kind of like that when we filmed the video, it was able to happen here and give that sense, at least to me, of like maybe the future, connection to the future, even though it's a piece about remembering the past.
Juvenilia, this piece, it opens up and tapping into such a wild energy. This is from ancient Rome.
So the title Juvenilia refers to, it's a subset of something that were called Saturnalias, actually, which were these wild parties. Parties surrounding like festivals related to the gods or whatnot, and they would last for many days and just be very, you know, rowdy, lots of drinking and frolicking and whatnot. The title is a reference to the party and the wildness, and also the word Juvenilia. In my mind, it's a play on the word juvenile, and there's something called Juvenilia in art, which are the works that maybe a composer wrote when they were a younger child even, that aren't part of their catalog, not considered mature, are just things they did when they were young. And the movements in that piece, to me, are sort of reflecting different aspects of music I liked to make when I was young. The first movement is kind of like a rock band. It's got a drum set with the orchestra, and it's very rhythmic, very exciting, full of like this intense percussive energy. And to me, I was sort of imagining, like, I used to play in like garage bands kind of when I was like a teenager, and it's kind of one of the ways that I started writing music actually was through that. So I was evoking in a way that part of my background. The second movement has like maybe a little more of a sort of jazzy, nocturnal aspect to it. And then the third movement is kind of a hybrid of the two, and it's just kind of supposed to have like a wild fun. So like I was both referring to my own juvenilia, but then I called it Juvenilia because I wanted to evoke that sense of just like rowdy, raucous celebration. So it's kind of a play on words, and maybe less about Rome and more about, again, childhood is really something I think about a lot, I guess, but specifically my musical childhood, like my musical influences and upbringing. When people talk about juvenilia, there's a sense of a dismissive quality, like, oh, this is immature, this is not refined, this isn't the best work, it's the work that that's been thrown away and that nobody wants to listen to anymore. I agree, they're not mature works, but even so, as just for myself, my own sort of artistic journey, I find them intensely fascinating because I think you can see in them the seeds of ideas that might mature decades down the road. And I think it's really interesting to reflect on that because you can see, oh, I was interested in this maybe rhythm or this harmony or this kind of approach to making music, and I can see how I got from point A to point B. You know, I can see how there was like maybe a through line or a connection between that very early idea, which you come to very naturally. There's, you know, when you're a kid making music, you're not overthinking usually. It's just like what you do for fun or whatever feels good. You know, it's just, it's very natural. And then as you get older, of course, I feel like as we get older, we become more analytical. We become more, we're just thinking and maybe questioning and doubting. And it's sometimes, I think, really liberating to access experiences, memories, thoughts from a period where it was like more free or something.
what I observe from my composer friends,
Yeah.
who they usually have this problem with sitting in front of a computer or scroll paper for hours and staring at them, don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And the second thing is they usually write at night because it's more quieter.
Yeah.
But just that, they lost a lot of hair.
They lost a lot of hair.
They can't think. Like there's this kind of mental block when they sit in front of the score and then just get paralyzed.
I try to avoid it as much as possible. And what I mean is that, so my process a lot of the times begins with some kind of improvisation or something that I try to make with very little thought. So a lot of times I will either record myself playing something at the piano or on the keyboard at the computer, or maybe with my voice, or maybe sometimes I also work with a DAW, like Logic, and like we'll just be working and just messing around in like a very fast way. Whatever the tools are, there's usually a beginning where I like to come up with ideas quickly and not overthink them, right?
That's a great idea.
And try to come up with a lot of ideas, and then it's more like a process of like choosing. It's less. I'm trying to avoid that what you just described, that blank page feeling of what do I do? It's really paralyzing. Staring at a blank page is the least inspiring situation I can think of.
So if I want to conclude, there would be just 3 steps. The first one would be the switch of a perspective mentality.
Yeah.
And make it as like a playground.
Yeah.
And second is to get our brain get fired
by
just trying out a lot of the tricks
and
done in a very quick time frame.
Yeah.
And the third would just left with selections and improve or
Yeah.
shape it.
Yeah. I like the idea of like playground, that word. Like I think it's important to have a part of the process where it does feel free like that, where it feels just like you can play with things with no pressure. It doesn't matter whether it's good, whether it's bad, it doesn't matter. It's just throwing things against the wall, having a good time. Yeah. And then later you can come back to it and really be more analytical, more technical. But at the core of the idea is that spirit of play, of creativity that's kind of like, unfiltered from all these layers of like judgment. Is this good or is this bad? Does this work? Does it not work?
Oh, those are great advice. Thanks for that. So I want to move on to this evergreen.
Oh yeah.
That's a beautiful piece.
Oh,
but
thank you.
Felt when I listened to it, it started with this emotional state and psychological state, but later it moves into somewhere deeper and unshakable.
Yeah.
And which is deprived from this physical and psychological state because there is an emotion that's very constant and very deep calm, whereas like a calm feeling, it's always get disrupted by the outside world or the external events.
Yeah.
So what is that kind of inspiration really attract to you?
Yeah, for evergreen, that is absolutely connected to the natural world. There are couple inspirations for that. One is the natural world, but actually specifically there's a story surrounding the winter solstice celebration. And I had a narrative in my mind of kind of like building up to that and then coming away from that. So like the first movement, Fading Light, is sort of imagining like the days getting shorter and shorter, getting colder and colder, darker and darker. So that's the light is sort of receding and fading, and there's a little bit of tension that comes in at the end of it as it gets darker, so to speak. And then there's a movement that's very nocturnal and sort of just like still and almost atmospheric. To me, that was like the nighttime before the shortest day. And then the shortest day is sort of maybe even ironically exuberant. Just it's a movement that's like they're playing these crazy arpeggios. It's really hard and virtuosic, but it has this very bright, ebullient, like joyful quality to it. Because to me, that's like the party. Because I guess like I don't know, traditionally or in maybe ancient times, but even today, there's kind of like parties, celebrations associated with the shortest night. So it ends with. I'm actually blanking on the title of the last movement, but there is a hopeful quality to it. And to me, that's like sort of the dawn.
Rosy figured down.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because to me, after the party and after the longest night, you have the shortest day and the longest night. Because the shortest day is like the party, but then the longest night is like, to me, this feeling of, okay, we had a big party, but now it's the dead of winter. Maybe the hardest time of the year because it's cold, it's dark, So that movement, the longest night, is maybe a little more sort of dramatic and dark to it. But then it ends with a sense of hope, because the cool thing in my mind, about the longest night is that now the days start getting longer. Yeah. Okay, we're at the darkest part of the year, but also there's a little sliver of hope, just a little bit, because we know that the days are from now on going to start getting a little bit longer. It might take a while. So to me, that calm and that hope is this feeling of, okay, we're in the depths of winter, but we have a hope of spring and renewal on the horizon, even if it's in the distance.
Yeah.
So that piece to me is about, I think, maybe more of like cycles of nature and how our experience of humanity and being a human is interfacing with those cycles and kind of like drawing a parallel between the cycles of seasons and light with our own cycles in our life, and our own feelings of despair and hope, excitement, longing, so it's kind of that, in that sense, I think that's the relationship to the natural world.
I also noticed that you were getting inspired by Susan Cooper.
Yeah.
And here's a little quote for you, if I'm allowed to speak to it.
Please, yeah.
Shortest day, and when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, revolving. Through all the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen. Yeah. So there's a lot of metaphorical.
Yeah, absolutely.
places.
And that poem, that poem by Susan Cooper was a big part of the inspiration. And I first of all, it's such a beautiful book, poem, however you want to think about it. And it captures this quality of that narrative I described, the sort of apprehension and then the explosion of energy and then the sort of maybe darkness, but then also hope for the future. I love that story and the way she articulates it. To me, the connection between something like a work of literature and a piece of music it's more, the way I process it, I think is probably a little bit more subconscious, a little bit more intuitive. I'm not being so explicit about like analyzing the source and making explicit connections, but I like to just sort of like take it in and then maybe respond in my own way, in like a poetic way, just as a kind of like artistic response that's maybe a little bit more just a reflection or a sort of poetic interpretation in a slightly looser way. So I just like sitting with something and letting those ideas seep in and seeing where it might take my own musical ideas.
You also co-founded Sleeping Giant.
Yeah.
And that, I think, from innovation to instrumentations and composing, everything, as well as aesthetics, I think this is one of the best examples I've heard, experienced. This is phenomenal because for 21st century music, especially we call new music, it's not always the case. So first of all, what do you vision in this?
Yeah, so Sleeping Giant, that is a composer collective that I co-founded with 5 other composers: Jacob Cooper, Chris Cerrone, Andrew Norman, Timo Andres, and Ted Hearn. We all met each other when we were in school together at the Yale School of Music, and we became friends, and we decided after finishing school to form a collective. Initially, the concept was we were going to kind of pool our resources and present concerts of our music, just because, when you're just out of school, we all were living in New York. It's obviously can be very hard to get started, especially when it comes to presenting your music at a concert. It can be hard to get that off the ground. So we figured, just as a practical matter, if we worked together, it would be easier. And that's what we did for a year or two. But then where it evolved after that was more of like group collaborative projects, which became much more exciting than just putting on a concert. So for example, the first one we did was with a group called the Deviant Septet. I don't know if they exist still, but they were an instrumentation the same as L'Histoire de Soldat. And they, in fact, what they commissioned us for was to write a companion piece to L'Histoire. And so we wrote a piece called Histories, and each of us wrote a movement. We kind of worked together to come up with the concepts of the overarching structure, and then each of us wrote a movement of it. And then together we had created roughly 50-minute piece of music, what some people call like evening length work. And that was really fun. And I always thought, hey, how cool, like we've made an evening length work, but I've only written 1/6 of it. So it's very efficient. And so then we did many more projects like that, these collaborative works. And that's kind of what it evolved into, this kind of collaborative projects that we did. And it's been really great. I think that this model of a collective can be really wonderful, especially for younger composers, because it's just a way to share ideas and to use it to sort of share resources, share ideas, and work together. And I think as a group, oftentimes you can achieve bigger goals, or maybe easier than you could achieve those same goals as an individual.
Yeah.
But also you can learn a lot. I mean, we formed a group because we were both friends and admirers of each other's music. So it was both those things. It was friendship and it was artist, the art. It's been, especially composers, which can be very isolated. So I like like a collective, or it can be more than that. It can just be a group of friends, that trust and respect and that you share things with.
Yeah, doing this kind of collective creations, what are your top rules or top for discussion, avoiding to become
And just as in any collaboration, I think listening is probably the most important thing. And that can be very hard. It's a very simple thing to say, but actually really hearing someone and trying to empathize with their perspective is harder than it sounds. Especially I find in artistic situations, because, artists, they're really, really strong opinions, right? Yeah. Especially about their own work. That's a lot of times part of what fuels their art, is they feel strongly about it. So it can be really hard to compromise. It can be really hard to acknowledge another perspective if it feels like it's somehow against your perspective. But it's so important in these collaborative situations to try as hard as you can to listen and understand and empathize. So getting past that first, oftentimes very emotional reaction to any type of criticism or feedback, and then working hard to see whatever they're saying from their perspective, I think can often lead to really, really important insights about your own work. And that, to me, is what's so valuable about the collaborative process, is that ultimately you're going to learn something about yourself through the eyes of another person, and they're going to add something that brings your work to a different place, that maybe elevates your work to somewhere you might not have been able to reach on your own. And that's really cool. Number two, specifically to a kind of, if you're trying to do something collectively, having clearly defined roles, I think, is very important. This is just in a very practical level. Like, we would shift roles. So let's say we have a project. We'd usually have a couple people who are kind of like the project managers. And they were like the point person. And that would usually change project to project. So I think that either a system where people have the same role and it's very clearly defined and everyone's comfortable with that, or where they take turns, because every project has a part which nobody wants to do. I don't know what a third one might be.